We'll call the Board of Public Works meeting of Tuesday, September 7th to order. Number 2, approval of the minutes from August 16th. Mr. Fire, motion, second by Mr. Fisher. Comments, questions? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Citizens' comments. No citizens to speak here, so we'll go on to construction update presented by Tim Rasmussen, Assistant Street Superintendent. Tim.
Afternoon. Some notable accomplishments since the last time Chris was here. Chip sealing the last stretch on East 29th Street between Peach and Washington was completed, and the sweeping began today. 3rd and Mulberry, Mill and Place project, 4th cul-de-sac west of Columbus, and 25th between Maple and Vine has the first layer asphalt completed. Driveways and final layer of asphalt scheduled for the remainder of next week. Laurel Court and Pine between 4th and 6th Mill and Replace projects are scheduled for asphalt. Kind of up to American Asphalt schedule here, but later this week into next week. Park and Clark Mill and Replace projects, the water department has completed with their main and service replacement. We Energies is now there replacing gas line, and their anticipated completion date is September 17th. Once they're completed, we will follow up in there for ditching and tiling, and then the surface replacement. 8th between Central and Cedar, the sanitary work is done on 8th by the contractor, and we've begun the road reconstruction last week, and things are moving right along. Concrete curb and gutter replacement where needed is scheduled for this week, and the road base will be completed by the end of this week on 8th, and then the same process on Cedar. We'll then follow up on Cedar, like I was saying, between 6th and 8th. Once the contractor's done, West McMillan is now completed and open to traffic with some minor painting left to do on that project. Then just to kind of recap, a brief update on last Friday's rain event. Chris totaled 4.75 inches of rain in our rain gauge from Thursday night through Saturday morning, of which the majority of the rain came around 9 p.m. to midnight on Friday. As expected, we had several streets that flooded. Luckily, we only had one road with a washout out on West McMillan, east of Lincoln, where there were 3 large cross culverts that undermined. We did have several shoulder and ditch repairs we did throughout the city because of the rain. And between the street division, engineering, and wastewater, we've compiled a list of areas, and we'll be meeting on this storm event in the future. That's all I have. I'll entertain any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Tim? I almost called you Chris. I have just one comment. I've gotten some complaints from about the gas company. One on the road construction, I think on Clark or somewhere in that area, that it's taken forever. And you guys have nothing to do with up past the university, but that's been going on some time, and they're leaving it lay there. So just wanted to pass it on.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Tim. Okay, next, number 5, or next, Tom Turchi. Sorry, Tom, go ahead.
That's perfectly all right.
You wanted me to forget, didn't you?
Yes, exactly. So our sanitary sewer contract 2021-02, which Tim had referred to, our East Ace sanitary sewer reconstruction portion of that, all underground work is done on that project. The Cedar Avenue from A Street to 400 feet north, including all laterals, this work will be done complete this week. And that means that our contractor then will be packing up and moving up to Blodgett Street between Wood Avenue and St. Joseph's Avenue. And this project is scheduled to start on Thursday. Earth Incorporated is working on the sanitary sewer installation for the city subdivision, and this work should be done this week, and they'll begin water main installation here next week, or later this week or early next week. We do have a public informational meeting coming up for the design of East 17th Street from Maple Avenue to Peach Avenue with the residents, and that is scheduled for Wednesday, the 15th at 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. here at City Hall.
Mr. Fisher.
I'm just curious, have you received any complaints from residents about that street on 17?
Not at this point. We met with the fair, Dale Christensen last week at this point, and talked to him before the fair to give him some ideas of what was going to be, what it might look like, and where they would like crossings. We have not heard word one from any of the residents at this point, so.
All right, thank you. I was just
Anybody else? Okay, thank you, Tom. Dan?
I just want to follow up on Tim's comments on the storm from last Friday night. In addition, we're kind of monitoring all the stormwater overflows that he mentioned, but we've also had some sanitary sewer backups, and we're doing the same kind of thing there, monitoring where we've had those, some in some areas where we've never had sewer backups before, some in some areas where we know we've had trouble, but we've been making improvements over the years, but we haven't had a real tester of an event like this in a while, so we have work doing some of those areas. So we'll kind of be digesting all that information and figuring out where our next priority should be and trying to prevent those from happening.
Mr. Turkey.
Just for a little tidbit of information, the rain event that we had that evening, we calculated it to be about just a hair short of a 25-year event. And typically most of our system is designed to handle a 10-year event, which is a 1 in 10 chance. So it was larger than most of our systems can handle.
Any questions for Dan's or Tom's comments? Okay. Number 5, approval of wastewater treatment plant facilities planning request for proposals presented by Sam Warp, wastewater superintendent. Sam.
What'd the last chairman say? Speak loud and fast?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm here tonight to ask for going out for a request for proposal for the wastewater division for a facilities plan. You've probably never heard of a facilities plan because they're not done very often. What it is, it's a long-range planning. It's a 20-year life for what the future is going to look at the wastewater plant and the collection system also. It's laid out by the DNR in NR 110, the code, on what has to be done. It's all itemized exactly what has to be done. The purpose of that is to protect the ratepayers and the businesses, the residents, so they don't end up paying for something they don't really need. So it has a very good justification. It's just a big project to undertake. We're looking at it right now. You have to have a need to go out for one. You wouldn't do it otherwise. And we found 4 areas of need that a consultant will have to look at for sure. And that'd be phosphorus compliance, the probable disinfection mandate that's coming, biosolids handling, and then the last one would be to look a little bit more closely at a couple of the areas in our collection system where we did have some sewer backups. By code, they have to look at the entire collection system, but we want to pay special interest in a couple areas after this last rain event that we had. So what I'm going to recommend is that we go out for a request for proposals and be sent to 3 engineering firms for the completion of a facilities plan for the wastewater division.
Motion. Okay, Mr. Varsho, second by Mr. Fire. Comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Sam. Number 6, approval of easement to. Just so everybody knows, my laptop's not working, so I'm going by the screen here. And Dan jumped ahead on me, so that's why I stopped. Approve easement to Frontier Communications on city property at 201 South Oak. Presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Thank you. I'm using the screen also for my items, so we're competing here a little bit.
And my memory, I didn't memorize everything tonight.
Earlier this year, Frontier Communications relocated an overhead fiber optic line to underground to accommodate the new construction at the REMS Celebration Center on South Oak Avenue. That route crossed under Oak Avenue and entered city property by the Oak Avenue Community Center and connected to an existing utility pole. And the drawing on the screen here shows the location of where this underground facility crossed and accessed the power pole there. Normally, when facilities leave the public right of way and enter onto private property, even if that's city property, we document that by an easement. In this case, this is kind of an after-the-fact easement. Frontier didn't secure this ahead of time, although we knew they were working on a project. The timing of it was such that they didn't get the easement ahead of time. So we're simply wanting to secure this after the fact easement now that the facility is in place. And this, the easement itself is attached in your agenda packet. The line crosses about 60 feet into city property and crosses under a driveway there and does not interfere with the city's use of the property. So the recommendation is to simply approve the easement as requested.
I'd entertain a motion. Mr. Fire, second by Mr. Varsho. Comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carried. Thank you. No. Sam gave me the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, number 7, approval of easement to We Energies for gas service to the Daniels Addition City Subdivision presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
Okay, thank you. So the city subdivision, as you all know, is on 5th Street, east of Lincoln or west of Lincoln Avenue, and we're working with other utilities to get installed as part of the improvements there, in addition to the municipal utilities and street improvements. The plat, the original plat of the Daniels Addition shows a 10-foot wide easement along the perimeter of the rights of ways for utilities to locate within that easement. However, it's what I would call a generic easement. It's not assigned to a specific utility. And more recently now, we're seeing utilities want to be named on easements, so they have assurance that easement applies to them, and they're less comfortable being in just a generic easement. So We Energies has asked us to ask the city, as the owner of the adjacent properties, to sign an easement that would give them the 10-foot easement area, same as what's shown on the original plat, but in their name. And in your agenda packet is a map that shows the areas that they're asking. Again, it matches what has been defined as the easement, so it doesn't provide any other additional encumbrance to those properties, what was originally shown on the right-of-way plat. We've worked with the We Energies a bit to tweak the language to make sure that it addresses our needs. As we're not used to seeing We Energies locate in a private easement, often they're in the right-of-way versus outside of the right-of-way. But I think we've come to a satisfactory easement language on that, and I'm recommending approval of that easement this evening.
Motion. Mr. Fisher, second by Mr. Varsho. Comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Dan. Number 8, consideration of additional incentive for sanitary sewer lateral replacements with unique circumstance, presented by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
We've had a pretty successful lateral replacement program here by offering some incentives to property owners to replace their laterals. And it was first started when we had a construction project going on where we're replacing the main. We put an incentive in that we could waive the special assessments for the private side laterals. And several people took advantage of that in those early years. And then in 2015, we added a $500 incentive payment.
Mr. Fisher, second by Mr. Varsho. Comments? It's working.
It's working now. So we added a $500 incentive payment in 2015, and then in 2019, we upped that to $1,000. And since that we were making those payments, we've seen approximately 164 sewer laterals replaced. So it's been very successful. And lateral.
Just excuse me a minute here, I'll get this shut off.
To property owners.
You did something good. All right, sorry,
Okay.
Dan.
No problem. So we've made great progress on that, but there are still some obstacles that prevent people from taking advantage of those incentives. And in some cases, we have unusual circumstances that make the lateral replacements more costly. In this past season, we've had a couple, one where the lateral was unusually deep, and one where Sam's been approached by a lateral owner that's very long, where the house sits a long ways back off the right of way. So the $1,000 doesn't go as far then when you have some of these extenuating circumstances. And owners have asked for more consideration from the city to make it, further the incentive. We're limited by $1,000, so that's been approved by the board in the past. So we want to look at, for now, offering an additional $500 incentive for these unique circumstances. And what we're suggesting that targets would be if the depth is 12 feet or greater or a length of 90 feet or more. And that would be a determination made between the Director of Public Works and the wastewater superintendent. As anything, costs are going up. We know that there's much more activity for plumbers with doing lateral replacements with all the lead services that the water department is replacing, so that there's just more demand right now than there is supply for the plumbers to go after these things. So we're seeing a price increase there. And there may come a time where we would want to increase our incentive for all lateral replacements. Right now, I think we're good with $1,000 total, or the $1,000 incentive for I would call standard lateral replacements. But we do have a few of these that exceed the normal situation. So what we're suggesting is that the board approve an additional $500 incentive for sanitary sewer lateral replacements for unique circumstances such as normal depth or length, and to be determined by the Director of Public Works, wastewater superintendent, and that would become effective.
Motion, Mr. Varsho, second by Mr. Fire. Comments, question? I would just say, and Sam and Dan could speak to it, but I know it's been a very successful program, and it does a tremendous amount of good with getting rid of Clearwater. So, anybody have anything else? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Those against, motion carries. That wasn't mine going this. Okay, number 9, review policy 5.022, street closing, and section 1336, temporary closing the streets. Discussion by Dan Connect, Director of Public Works. Dan.
All right. As follow-up to the council meeting a couple weeks ago, I wanted to have just a little discussion on what our current policies are for street closures. And I included in your packet the policy. Policy, and it's a very simple policy, as I mentioned at the council meeting, talks about the process to request a street closure. We also have an ordinance in chapter 13 of the municipal code that talks about temporary closings of streets. The policy dates back to 1996, and what I could tell, the ordinance dates back to 1982 code, and there really hasn't been any changes in a long time, so it may be overdue. The policy and the ordinance don't quite align with each other. If you read through them, they're both a little bit different, but they're both fairly simple. Our approach in the past has been to be somewhat generous with these requests. And as I mentioned the other night, we haven't had problems with that approach to it. As you see in the policy and also in the code, these are simply approvals for closing the street. There's no other approvals or variances noted or implied, no noise variance or any alcohol consumption related approvals in this approval of just the street closing. As I mentioned at the council meeting, we get a handful of these each year. Some of them are non-commercial, charitable type Nonprofits, one example is we had the Chestnut Center do an event this summer and closed up part of 3rd Street. We do get some commercial requests. Common one is we get a bar or restaurant downtown that wants to close for a special event. We have one coming up in a couple of weeks, in fact, on 5th Street, closing for a special event. We have a number of closures on 17th Street due to events at the fairgrounds. Those are probably a little more expected than some of these others. And then we have the neighborhood requests, like the topic of the discussion at the council meeting. We had one in the Prairie Run subdivision this past July, and without incident. We had a partial closure this summer or this spring for a church that wanted to use some parking lanes for an event they were planning there. So it's a wide variety of things. Main Street has some non-city sponsored functions that they request street closures once in a while. Well, so until now, we really haven't had issues with those kinds of things. I haven't proposed any changes at this time. I really just wanted to hear input from the board and others on whether this is practice we'd like to continue, and so what kind of criteria would you like us to see? Do we limit who's eligible to request these closures? Should we be charging a fee? We don't now, and what other considerations should we be considering as part of this policy update? If we agree to continue, then I'd suggest developing a more formal permit process than what we've had now, and probably get a little more detail about what the event is and some of those things. But mainly just wanted to have a discussion tonight, and then we can take that information back and work on updating policy.
Mr. Fisher.
I have some thoughts, but I also want to ask some questions really quick. Just more for background. So obviously you said this was brought to us because of the issue that was brought up at the last council meeting. If I am understanding correctly, the issue really was, and correct me if I'm wrong, they went through all the proper channels, they closed the street, but there was really one person or one household that closed the street. It wasn't an official block party, and there was confusion on whether or not they had a noise variant along with the closure of the street. Is that correct?
Yeah, I guess when you say official block party, we don't have a term that's an official block party, but I do think it was the noise that was the main issue there for that individual. When someone asks for a block party or a street closure for a neighborhood party, we don't get an invite list to know if all the neighbors are invited and who's involved. It's normally one person who's.
Did they receive a noise variance? Did they get a noise variance?
No, they did not.
Okay,
No.
so they just closed.
Right.
All right. And maybe this is a question for the chief, but were the officers aware that there was not a noise variance?
Please go to the podium.
So I've taken the last couple of weeks to kind of take a closer look at this. And I've talked to a lot of people in the department. I myself have been around for going on 24 years, I think. I haven't found anybody who didn't know or realize that the closing of a street for a block party did not include some sort of a variance. I've never seen one of those permits. Neither have anybody there because they don't generally come to us. So we will own that we did not know. I did not know that you needed a noise variance. Addition, the other question was asked about alcohol in the street. Again, when you talk to the officers and when you look at past history, the closing of a street seems common sense to me that an individual would be able to walk into the street with a beer. So there were no variances given from us whatsoever.
Okay, and I appreciate that because the reason I'm asking these questions is that helps me give better input, because I think one thing we need to do is also address how to internally communicate to throughout this city what they've actually, do they have a noise variance? Is this just a street closure? I think we need to do as a whole a better job of just making sure that we are communicating internally what someone has actually, what they've received, for lack of a better word. I don't know if that necessarily has to go into policy per se, but I think somehow that issue needs to be addressed, because when I was hearing the comments, that was kind of my takeaway is I don't know if they were so concerned about a policy, they were more concerned how to happen. And if maybe there had been better communication, that would have resolved the issue before it got violent. So that's one thought and concern outside of this policy is how do we just create that system of maybe a stronger communication internally. But then also my thought is, and you kind of mentioned this, is just making sure there's more consistency between the two, because I did notice that. And then also, I would like to see somehow, I guess different, I don't want to say different levels, but maybe different expectations for an organization versus a person who's registered or who's coming to the city. I mean, one family or one person, I'm assuming, came. Now, I appreciate what you said, Dan. You don't necessarily get a list, but maybe if a local bar or Mackey or Main Street Marshfield come to us, there's a different expectation on them versus if Joe on Fifth Street comes to us and is wanting to close a street. Maybe we have to look a little more closely. What is, again, I'm just making up names, but what is Joe on Fifth Street really wanting to do? I mean, some of these events happen all the time. I mean, you're coming on a regular basis on some things asking for alcohol use on the street. So I think possibly different expectations for organizations versus personal use might be something we want to look at.
Anybody else? Did you have anything, Pat? Did you have anything else you wanted to add to what you think?
The only thing I could add is again, I would agree with Dan that this is somewhat unprecedented. I don't recall in my time one of these happening to where there was that type of an incident. I did have several other residents reach out to me the following day, and I was apologetic to them as far as the noise, because that was the real crux of the concern of what was going on over there. So we can definitely own that, and we can improve upon that. So regardless of the changes to this ordinance or policy, realizing now that that does not come with some sort of a variance, we can fix that. So the other thing is when you look into, and we had a real brief conversation, Dan and I, about what type of criteria you might use to deny this, and I think that could end up being a bit of a deeper conversation than you realize, as far as if you look at the individual and what criteria you might use to deny that. So I don't know if there's an easy answer for that one, but that's all I have.
My personal belief is I'm not sure that we should be giving out to block parties. Over the years, I've been to block parties before, and I've never seen a street closed because of it. Now, maybe it's different nowadays, but normally it was just it's a block party. So somebody's backyards and stuff. So, I don't know if we want to look at that or not, and just have the events like you got Main Street and some of these other ones. But I think, go ahead, Tom.
Following with Dan and Pat here, we've given numerous ones over the past 2 decades that I'm aware of, and this is the first time we've ever seen anything like this.
Okay.
I think it's a little unique to this one too, and one of the suggestions that I heard that might, I think, warrants some discussion is a canvassing of that area to see, is this a residential party or is it one individual? Because I think had that been done, we would have learned a lot of information that we might have used in making that decision. That's just an assumption. I think it's going to be case by case, but I think there's some merit in that part of it.
I think Mr. Fisher's right on that, the communication aspect. I think that would solve. Did you have something, Mr. Marshall?
No, I don't. I got a phone call this past week regarding it as well. But the gentleman works second shift, so he was trying to sleep all day long. So it's kind of a different type of situation for him. I mean, even if their noise wasn't very high, they were just having a good time all day long, and he still was upset because it was across the street. Well, he slept all day, which I understand his point, but it's doing doing a canvas beforehand, looking at that neighborhood over there, maybe it probably wasn't a place to shut down the street at that time. But like Dan and Tom said, you give 20 or 30 of these away in 20 years and nothing happens. I don't know how to move forward.
Dan?
Yeah, I will say, we do have a couple of tools that are used here. We've gone to an online permitting process for our building permits and some other engineering permits. And I think this would be a good candidate to put together a permit application package that asks some pertinent questions and lays out some criteria and so forth. And if there is going to be music or whatever, that would trigger the noise variance request and what, there could be other things that would be part of it as well. So I think we'll work on something and bring something back to consideration.
I think if anybody has any ideas that you think of later, contact Dan and so he can look at policies and Pat, you as well, if you and your staff have anything, let's communicate.
You bet.
Thank you. Okay, number 10, set date and time for annual bus tour of Public Works project presented by Dan.
Thank you. So last year we did not have a bus tour. Prior to that, we've tried to do one around early part of September and just take a look at some of the projects we've been working on and what might be coming up for next year. This year I was looking at trying to get this on our calendars for next week. My initial date was Wednesday the 15th, leaving here at 5 o'clock was my target. The sun's going down earlier and earlier these days, and so getting out before the shadows get long would be helpful. But not all the aldermen could make it on Wednesday. Quentin was not available on Wednesday. And so Thursday is another date that works for the bus company. So I guess I'm looking for you guys to give me some direction on what you'd prefer. If neither of those dates work, then we would have to look at something else maybe. I guess as we get beyond next week, it might be tougher to get something on
So
the
the
calendar.
13th would be Wednesday of next week? Is that?
No, the 15th is Wednesday of
Oh,
next week.
15th?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody have a problem with,
Yeah, yeah,
So if it is at 5,
15th would work. Okay, and the rest of you did respond that the 15th worked, it just didn't work. I
Mike,
think
do
we have,
you?
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
all right,
So Wednesday, the 15th.
Wednesday the 15th.
At 5
And
o'clock.
We'll leave here at 5 o'clock or so, and we'll take about an hour or so.
And, you know, over the years, I know Mike's done it too, that we've invited other people. There's always room normally on the bus. And people that have gone through that, you know, you always hear, hey, the city's not doing anything with the roads. And a couple people that I invited, they said, holy God, there's a lot of them. And then Dan will throw out some numbers there, what stuff costs, so that's really good. And is that, are we gonna have that videotaped as well again?
Once we have a date now, I'll talk.
Yep, okay. So if you know of somebody that would like to go, it's a great experience. Tom, you had,
Just to let you know, some of my staff and I may not be able to make it because that's the night of the public informational meetings for 17th Street.
oh,
Yeah, we have a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
It'll be a challenge to fit it all in, but.
okay.
But-
We're good to go on that. All
Yeah,
right.
we can cover it. And as you said, Tom, we'll invite the rest of the council to attend. I'll make an announcement next week at the council meeting, and maybe get an email out, and we do have additional space if you want to bring it.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Recommended items for future agendas. Anybody have anything for future agendas? Okay, entertain a motion. Mr. Varsho, motion to adjourn, second by Mr. Fire. We are adjourned. Thank you.